After 10, I think we have a quorum. First, I think we should have introductions. I think there's some new people on the board and we might want to introduce everybody. So I'm Robert Keller.
John Dable. Morris Cox.
Kathy Greasy with Greater Oshkosh.
Brian Stafford.
Art Branston with Greater Oshkosh.
Nate Gustafson.
Trisha Rothermel with Greater Oshkosh.
Mary Krieger.
Adam Dorn. I'm just clicking buttons over here.
And I'm Jerry Bougie, the board coordinator.
And you got online.
So the first thing on the.
Rob,
We
we got
got a couple. Oh, yeah, a couple, sorry.
Good morning, Andy Buck.
Good morning, Elizabeth Hartman.
Okay, thank you. First thing on the agenda is approval of the minutes from March 11th, 2022 IBB meeting. I make a motion.
Second.
Morris. Motion made section. Any discussion, corrections? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Has passed. Next thing is election of officers. For that, I think I'll turn it over to Gary.
Yes, on an annual basis, we need to re-elect officers for the board. And part of the bylaws and what it's at some future meeting, it's down the road here, we will be looking at our bylaws again as a board. We haven't done that in many years but anyways, for the election of officers, for 1-year terms, we have, we'll start with the chair of the board. So would someone like to nominate anyone? Any nominations for chair?
Like to nominate Robert Keller.
Second.
Who'd second? Oh, Morris, okay. Oh, Mary Ann, hello. Are there any other nominations? Any other nominations? Once more, any other nominations for chair of the board? If not, we'll take a vote for Rob Keller as board chairman.
In favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Looks unanimous.
All right, thank you, everyone. I really.
Take it over here, Rob.
All right, I really appreciate it. Thank you. Next item would be the election of or nomination for vice chair. Is there any nominations?
Who's the current vice chair?
George Dearborn.
Oh, and
It's not available, but
he's not available today, but he's still on the board.
Yes, yes, he's on vacation this week.
can we nominate him without him being here?
I don't know why.
There's nothing-
Why not?
Nothing preventing it. If he doesn't want it, he can always
Yeah, at the
relinquish it.
at the
another
next meeting or whatever. Sure.
I would nominate George Dearborn as vice chair.
Thank you.
Second that.
Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Hearing none? All in favor of George Dearborn for vice chair? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? George has been nominated. Next item is secretary treasurer. Any nominations? for
That's currently
secretary
you.
treasurer?
Is it currently me?
Yeah.
It's currently.
Interesting.
Didn't know that, huh?
Yeah, all those duties you do for this,
Right.
you know, all the work you do.
That's not a small binder.
I know. This is 2018 to current, so.
Oh,
I nominate Mr. Krieger.
I second.
Okay, Mary Krieger nominated. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? All in favor? Mary
Aye.
Krieger for secretary treasurer, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any opposed? Hearing none, Mary is secretary treasurer.
Thank you.
Okay, next item would be board discussion and presentation by Greater Oshkosh Economic Development Corporation regarding proposed new IDB revolving loan fund program to replace the existing IDB revolving loan fund program. For that, we'll hear a preacher.
All right.
Well,
Go ahead.
I can just give
Yeah,
a little
introduce
intro on this. The board in the past has started discussing other ways in which it could use its revolving loan fund program. The program began, and it's part of the summary that came with your packet, but it began back in 1980 with an infusion of $1 million from a county board allocation at county budget time back then. There's been some additional infusions by the county board into the IDB's fund for the revolving loan fund, and for a period of time the loan fund was very well used. It was specific to the municipalities only, and in that case, if a municipality did loan dollars from this fund, it had to pledge its taxing authority as part of the loan. It became apparent along the way that particularly with Oshkosh and Neenah, the larger cities, that there's a lot of concern about borrowing money and having to pledge its taxing authority and to also have these loans go on their debt service. So it really it started to become a difficult loan program in which we could, get dollars out there working for economic development. But in the last few years, the board has been talking about other ways we could use the loan fund to make it useful. More recently, I've been working with GoEDC on this, and we've been talking about different ways in which maybe we could utilize the fund, and as those who have been a part of the board, back in when COVID first hit back in 2020, the board did allocate $750,000 for a COVID relief fund to help small businesses to kind of get them through the difficult times of the whole pandemic. It was quite successful. GoEDC managed that for us, did a very good job. All those loans are current. We are working with one entity that is still, but those all those loans are being paid back currently. We've also infused another $75,000 into a rural revolving loan program with GoEDC. They received a USDA grant to help small businesses in rural areas. So the IDB did contribute an additional $75,000 for that program. But there still remains the larger revolving loan program the board has. And that's what we're really talking about today. The board has over $2.7 million roughly in which it could commit to this program or to this proposed program, I should say. And we have Tricia from GoEDC and Art from GoEDC here today to kind of explain this today and what they're thinking. And I'm sorry, Kathy.
Okay.
My
Who's
apologies. My apologies. Thanks, Art. So we'll turn it over to them. Certainly there, you got any questions, any thoughts? I've had Mary Ann look into some of the stuff related to this as well. And I appreciate that, Mary Ann, if you have anything too, as we go through this.
I will be honest with you, I skimmed, I need more time to look at
Uh,
this because
sure.
there's a lot of material.
Yes.
It's going back to 1980, so I do not want to say anything off the cuff that
Yeah.
would mislead anybody. Everybody
Yes.
knows how I always like to look into things.
Sure.
So I have some concerns, but that's fine.
Oh, okay.
Well, and is it okay?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think when Jerry and I talked about what we wanted to do today,
Mhm.
I said, let's make this a workshop, right?
Mhm.
We want to talk about what this could look like and give some direction to Jerry and our team too, of how we can create something that fits how, if this is something we want to go forward with, fits how, we operate, but then also fits within what the statutes say and then what the board is comfortable with as well. So the presentation I put together gives you just a little bit more oversight of how some of our existing programs, how they're managed, and then some of the opportunities that we see of how this partnership can really move some things forward for Oshkosh. So some of this, Jerry said there's some new people on the board, so maybe not familiar with what revolving loan funds are. So, I apologize for those who have been on here, and Elizabeth, who is very familiar with what these types of programs are. I'm going to give just a little overview for you. So can you guys hear me okay online?
Uh-oh.
Is there a thumbs up there?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, so then,
Yep, you bet.
the agenda kind of my presentation here, what I want to talk about today is we're going to go over what access capital gap financing is and how it serves economic development. And then I want to talk a little bit with you about our existing Go EDC programs, including the the two that Jerry just mentioned, and how we're currently operating and managing those. I got a little bit of results in there, and then of course some possibilities of what we can what we can go through as well. So if you want to jump to the next slide, and then you can go ahead to the next one right away too. So what is access capital? Access capital is really kind of the representation of access to capital. Access to capital is a very important part of how a business gets started, gets growing, right? No business does anything, John, you don't do anything unless you got some money in the bank to start with. So access to capital is really that it's a general idea of how easy or hard it is for a business to obtain the resources they need to get started. A big part of access capital is gap financing. And that's where, what we want to talk about today. Gap financing can take a lot of different, and access capital can take a lot of different forms as well. TIF is a big example of access capital. Grant money is an example for access capital. It's really that idea of what do you need, and that gap financing is what's that difference between what the bank is willing to provide to you or what you have in cash and what you need to get a project done or to be successful in a business. So that's really what we're talking about today is this, this gives us access capital. From an economic development standpoint, it is so important when we're talking about site selection and people choosing where they want to place their business. Access capital can be a determining factor. If a business is talking about expansion and, they need that, maybe they're going into a new market or they're doing that cash infusion is what really can sometimes push them across that finish line. And having access to that in where they're already located can be the thing that makes them expand here versus maybe picking up and moving a plant someplace else. So that's where, this access capital conversation is really important. We talk about industrial development, economic development as a whole. One other thing that we talk about with access capital, sometimes this lets us reach those businesses that don't necessarily, maybe they're not necessarily the big producers. They're not the Oshkosh Corp. That's not necessarily, but it's some of those businesses that support the rest of the economy, that help support that supply chain. That's what we try to focus on a lot with some of these programs. So next slide, right, talking specifically about what is a revolving loan fund. And that's what we're talking about here today. So a revolving loan fund, like Jerry said, usually they're started with a pool of money that comes from a source, government source, private funding, different places where a pool of money can come to. But the idea is that it self-replenishes by having that funding come back in. So sometimes there's growth within it when you have interest gained. But more often you're getting that money back and then you're using that money to re-loan to new businesses. So you're just kind of continuously switching it through. Usually our revolving loan funds serve, like I said, those smaller businesses, those, 0 to 50, maybe a little bit more in the efforts that they're putting forward. And the other part about a revolving loan fund is usually it has a shorter amortization schedule, right? You want that money coming back into your account so that way you can get it out faster. But that also is usually paired with a little bit more conservative on the interest rate, because you want to be able to, you're going to give them that shorter time frame so that you're not going to charge them as much as maybe you might see on a 30 or 25 years. So typically 5 to 7 years is what you see. Sometimes they'll go up to like 10 to 15. depending on the type of the program. So these are things that we get to, these are some of the things that we can discuss and talk about what we would like this, to look like. So I want to go over just a little bit talking, so that's what we're talking about here today. That's the ideas that we're contemplating, but I want to talk a little bit about the funds that we already have been administering and that we've been working through. So our organization was established we were officially established in 2014, really got off the ground in 2015. And actually before our first CEO was even in place, our board issued the first revolving loan fund from the city, Greater Oshkosh, or the city of Oshkosh, Greater Oshkosh Revolving Loan Fund. So it was really, it was established before that, but we started managing it in 2015. Right now we have around 1.5 million in assets, which is actually, that my number might be slightly off because we borrowed some money to some other locations. But that money was funded by the Winnebago County put some money into yours. City of Oshkosh did the same thing. The format for those is that we do target existing businesses with at least 2 years of financials. And then we look at loans between 25,000 and 250,000 is what, so minimum of 25,000, maximum of 25,000. And because this is gap financing, that gap financing idea is that, you're not going to be the primary lending. So we always go with a 1-to-1 match. So you have to have at least 50, we will never fund more than 50% of a project in this fund. Usually we try to be even 40% or less, but the guidelines that are set up in the bylaws is 1-to-1. And of course, we never want to be less than that bank. So, or we never want to be more than the bank. Sorry, we never want to be more than the bank. So the other side, what was really great about when we took over the revolving loan fund for the city of Oshkosh is we started working with WEDC on a program called Capital Catalyst. And that program was a WEDC grant. So there's a couple of sources we've used. City of Oshkosh RLF funds. We also actually had some funds that were granted to the organization from Chamco that went into this to do matching. And then we were able to get a WEDC grant to come into these programs. So we've done 3 rounds of funding on this program through WEDC. Each time the grant from them was $125,000. So we've had over $750,000 or $750,000 come into this account. We do have to give away, we are required to do grants within this program, but that's great because we're targeting startup businesses. Some of these businesses most of these businesses are pre-revenue. Some of them have been beta test concepts. So they're small, usually they're smaller, right? Inherently a startup business is a smaller business. But these loans usually are a minimum of 10,000, maximum of 100,000, and we can do up to $10,000 in the grant. Same thing here is the 1-to-1 gap financing.
Just so, can
Yes,
I ask
go
a
ahead.
question?
Yep.
I'm so sorry.
No,
I don't
please
want to
do.
like interrupt
No.
the flow. You're doing this. I just had a couple questions. Is that okay?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a workshop.
All right, cool. So as I think about what you just said, so I'm brand new.
Mhm.
Is this just Oshkosh?
So that's,
This
yes.
is just Oshkosh.
So
I need to
these
be putting in
programs-
Oshkosh tax.
Yep, so
Okay.
these programs is the city of Oshkosh and contiguous townships. And even so, if you're a contiguous township, we actually have an extra step where the board of directors has to approve it. So we have done loans through this program in the Kaimai, in Vinland, or not Vinland, nope, town of Oshkosh. So we've gone, we have done some projects that are slightly outside of it. But there's an extra step that's associated with it. And then that, that means that anyone outside of that are not eligible for that.
If I may clarify, these are all the Go EDC projects that they've administered,
Mhm.
Okay,
not necessarily the parameters that we're looking for on
Correct.
IDB fund.
got it.
So they're
Okay.
just
Yeah.
making the case of the things
Yeah.
that they have done.
We're
By
just kind of,
sharing a business case here
Right,
for
Yep,
Oshkosh,
yep.
but the greater
right.
board here will
Right.
consider the entire county.
Yep.
Because I'm a lead, so.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I figured that's where you're going with that,
We're
yeah.
setting up a
Yeah.
little bit the case of
Right.
why we need to activate these funds too. So.
Yep. Right.
Work with IDB.
Yeah, I'm tracking now. I just wanted to make sure.
No,
Yeah,
no,
I'm totally.
That's a
thank
good
you.
question. Yep.
Thank
So
you.
Want
these
to
are,
make sure I got you the answer you're
Yeah.
looking for.
Right, I just wanted to make sure, just
Mhm.
wanted to make sure.
You're not in the wrong room.
Yeah,
No.
that's true. I probably been kicked out, you all knew I was from Neiman.
I think you got another question? You got another question?
I do.
okay, go ahead.
The companies that you were talking about, what categories would you?
Great question. Yeah. So, really we don't have, we're limited to the extent that you have to be within, have 2 years of financials. We do typically stay away from like restaurant retail in this fund. in both funds. So Capital Catalyst, we cannot do restaurant. That's part of the grant that we have. We're not allowed to do restaurant and retail. And with revolving loan fund, it hasn't been really the right category, mostly because of the size of the loans. So, that's just something that hasn't been really. One of the things I'll talk about later on too, is that we do have some other funds that are out there. And for example, the Chamber of Commerce has really been strong in that category with their revolving loan fund for restaurant retail. So it's a, kind of a nice way where we can say these funds do serve different areas.
Okay.
Yep. But I mean, some examples, we have manufacturing companies who have done revolving loan funds. We have several manufacturing companies that are in there. We had, for example, the doggy paddle out at Bar is one of our revolving loan funds recipients. So interesting service, right? We all love our pets. Pets are great. People who come and live here want things for their pets. That was a great, kind of a great fill-in. On the Capital Catalyst side, we've had some very interesting businesses over the years. Probably the most interesting, which is, again, this one's also in Nakamai because they're out at Bar Storage, but advanced bed bug preparation. She's a service that goes in, and after before your exterminator come in, they do all of the pre-prep to get your house ready if you have bed bugs, because the exterminator will not do that. So they will package up all your goods. They'll bring it to their commercial laundry. I think they've done some work for the county and some of the facilities that we have here that need that service to eradicate bed bugs. So yes,
Thank
so
you.
interesting, right?
Not in our building.
Not in the building, no, in some of the residential, but that's who they're serving, and
Right.
it's a very interesting category.
Do you work with contractors, builders, or demolition contractors?
If they were interested in the loan, absolutely. So one of the big things that, not to date, well, we did on our COVID loans. We had some that came through in the COVID loan programs. One of the big things that we, I guess the other business category that's kind of excluded is a lot of real estate, those types of pieces, because we do look for a job creation component. One of the things that, we are evaluating on our current programs is how, with our current labor force, how much do we need that to be exact? We have a ratio where we, usually one, or for every $25,000 in loan funds, there should be a job created. But as we're looking to help businesses do more, maybe automation or streamlining to help, those are some of the things that we're considering, that maybe it's more about job retention as much as job creation, but there is always a job component associated with the loans that we're doing. So that's where some industries are naturally excluded because of that. Because if you're a real estate person building an apartment building, you're not creating jobs. We might be creating like one job, right? You're not creating a sector of jobs. So sometimes that development piece has been excluded.
And on the startup capital, are there any restrictions? Or once money is given, they can use it any way they want to?
In the application process, we do ask how they're utilizing the funds.
Okay.
So they need to establish with us if it's going towards machinery. Just gotta catch them with her. If it's going towards machinery, if it's going to training, staffing, rent, those types of things. So we are very thorough in really kind of what part of the benefit of these programs beyond just your traditional commercial bankers. Not saying that our commercial bankers don't do some of this, but we heavily consult with our clients. So there's a lot of consultation in which we go through these different processes and evaluate, do you have enough money? Do you have insurance in your are you forecasting that because everyone needs insurance, right? Do you have that in your pro forma? Do you have enough cash flow in your pro forma? So we're looking at those types of things to make sure that our businesses are asking for the right amount of money. Because I think one of the biggest mistakes a business can do is not have enough cash up front. And then they have to go back and ask for more cash. And it's a lot harder to ask for money when you've run out than if you get enough upfront. So that's one of the things that we work with them to make sure they're not taking out too much that they can't afford and not enough that they run short.
And are these lines of credit, or is this actual cash that's outlay?
Actual outlay cash. These are loans. These are direct loans that we do for the businesses.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, if I would just want to provide a little bit of context, a little bit of history. I think one of this was one of Jerry's goals for this year, to really take a look at our IDB fund, to see how it operates and the history, and we haven't had a loan taken out of this really for the last 5 years.
Yeah, that's
Probably.
probably 7-8
But
years.
7-8 years, this money's been sitting there without people taking money, because we've required municipalities to 100% guarantee it. Once we had one municipality get burned, everybody said, nope, we're not doing it. So the challenge really here is to take a look at how GoABC can make that fund that we have more accessible to the business community. But there's more to it because the IDB is not unique to Winnebago County. There's state statute that guides this fund. So that's going to be some of the challenge that we've had. And I had a couple talks with Andy Phillips, because as you mentioned, construction, and you talked about contractors, that's not something you've normally done.
Mhm.
Housing is not a word that is in the IDB statute. You know, and that's the
Right.
thing that we have to figure out, because when we sit in and go EDC meetings, the one thing that we hear over and over again is until we find more people and more housing for people, you need to stop recruiting because the job market's really tough. So one of the things that I've asked Andy to look into, who is going to build WCA, by the way, so you won't be getting a bill, is how are the ways that we can look at these funds to build workforce housing, to have affordable things? What's the industry way that we can look at it? And that's gonna be the challenge with GoEDC, which I'm really happy we're having this workshop, and that Jerry has been working with you guys to figure out how we can get these funds to actually work for our citizens, because they haven't been so far. So that's a little bit of the history of how we got to this point, because we've had this fund for 8 years that's been sitting dormant, correct? Yep.
Mhm.
And how much is the fund? I actually don't know.
Brian, it's over $2.7 million is what is currently in the fund. I don't have an exact number,
No,
but
I don't need it
that's a pretty close figure. And and the fund is built over the years just through interest and loans, past loans that been paid back, because there is an interest from that as well. So it's built. And so, yeah, I mean, it's
Who administers that on behalf of the county?
well, actually, it's our,
Manages that money?
it's actually our finance department, or county finance department.
okay.
Yeah, they handle that for us.
Were the COVID loans through that too?
Yes, and actually, the COVID loan program was funded from that IDB fund.
Mhm.
If not mistaken, about half of that money, Art and Tricia, was given back to the counties.
We
Correct.
got an initial check for $750 and then returned the balance.
Which was about 350. Well,
which was
close to 4,
$350.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I know we're
Mhm.
following up on some people who haven't.
Yeah, there was
So
one.
Right.
we have one that,
You have one
right,
in yours?
the bigger issue is that they don't no longer have a business here, because that's one of the obligations that they sign a contract with us, is that you maintain your business in this municipality. So they did not maintain, they're still in business, but not in the municipality.
They're no longer in the county.
So yeah, no longer in the county. So we're working with Jeff Mann.
Right.
Yeah, and
We've gotten some,
You've
some,
gotten some money
collected
back.
half of it. So we have the other half to be collected.
and they're lawyers.
That's the first,
They're actually, it's a law, rules a law.
Really?
yeah.
But I think when we set out for that one, we knew that, this was really what we're talking about, what we're doing now is more of a forward thinking growth, right? That was an emergency, right? That was rapid recovery. It was how quickly we can help our businesses to not close their doors that day. And I'll testify, my mom had worked for a restaurant for 40 years and COVID hit. And within a week, they said, we can't do this. And they shut their doors. And if here, we prevented that, because we said, we'll get you a cash flow. Yeah, it's a loan, but it's a cash flow to make sure that you can at least pay bills and breathe until PPP kicks in. We're all in grants, all those things that eventually were, probably the bigger determining factor, but having something to float them was what really made the difference for a lot of our businesses. So we're going I'll hit some of the stats on that one too. Like when we said, I remember, I think Art and Jerry discussed, like, how many of these, I think you guys asked, how many of these do you think will not get repaid? And we said, we don't know, but we're going to say 25%. And right now we're sitting with 1 out of 37 loans,
It's fantastic.
which is fantastic.
Yeah, it's all,
So, and it's pretty much the same on the city side too. We have one that's not in active repayment. So
And
I-
you're not
yeah.
giving up on that one.
And we're not
No,
giving up on
no.
either of them.
Right.
No, it's just that, so I mean, but I think that really does show you a little bit of how by having access to capital can be the difference between a business, either, in COVID time, it was the difference of having a business stay open. But in terms of expansion, it can be the difference in making a project happen.
Well, without cash flow,
Yeah.
you're going to lose less.
Yep.
I
So-
get a point of clarification from the chairman real quick. The purpose of this agenda item is to, number one, state that will this board come to consensus that something has to be done with this IDB fund? And number two, Greater Oshkosh is here making the case they're more than capable to help us and facilitate for this. That's the point? Okay.
So I can move through a couple of, the one thing I did want to point out with our capital catalyst, we have put $750,000 in funding. We have dispersed $759,000. So you can see how that money is coming back and now going out again. So that's where we start to see that, that's the exciting part about these funds is that they do revolve. So the next slide talks about this is the fund the other fund that came through here. So honestly, the way this came up is, we were dealing with the Winnebago County Rapid Recovery COVID loan program and started talking to some of these businesses who are like, I really, this could have helped me if I could have had access to more things like this. And so actually having a conversation with Frank Frassetto, who is a USDA representative, he hooked me up to talk to some USDA programs and found out that there was a grant that we could get to do a program just like this. So we got a 99, just under the $100,000 mark because of scoring. So 99,000 from USDA with the matching funds coming from this program. And it was $75,000 where we had $10,000 set aside to use for any of our fees, when we had lawyer fees, those kind of things as we're setting up the program. But the other $165,000 is in a revolving loan fund right now. And that is targeted to all of our rural areas, but specifically small businesses. And this is, again, the USDA regulation. So the USDA is regulating what is rural and then regulating what is defined as a small business. But we've already had one loan go out in that. Kathy, who administers all of our access capital, is working with about 5 different other companies. We probably won't get to them all, but we will get to a few of them before the funds run out to get this funding out there. And I mean, it's great. It's the one that we already helped was a business that was established, but was on a land contract and wanted to buy out, or they were leasing and they wanted to buy out into their land contract, which it was an amazing deal for them because this land contract had, was before the real estate rates went up. So, it was one of those things where it's like doing this deal right now, helping them get that little bit of gap financing probably saved them a lot of money in the long run if that had to get pushed off for a few years. And now they have the ability to reinvest in that building because they own that building versus leasing that building.
Could you tell us in what community that was actually?
Amro,
That was actually.
that was in
yes.
Amro.
Okay.
Yep, in their industrial park.
Okay.
So, and I mean, yeah, and the thing, we can get into this a little bit later too, about like what's public and what's not public. And I think that makes a big difference of what we bring to the table too, because we can share some information with them, but there's some confidentiality that they have with working through us versus working like directly with Jerry, who, will be, have to have some more visibility into things, those types of things. So that's a rule. And then the next slide just kind of talks again about these programs we've talked about. We've sunset these programs as in we're not issuing any new loans on these COVID loan programs. Any of the funds that we had that hadn't been dispersed or returned, we're just actively, we're in the process right now of looking through the repayments and, then how we will put these monies back to the originators. So, that's what we're working through with right now is just continuing through. Most of these should be closed in 2024 is when those loans will come through. But again, 58 businesses that were assisted through these programs. So talk a little bit about, again, we're not the only ones out here doing this. There are a few other ones. I already mentioned the Chamber of Commerce has a program, which is pretty specific to the, Oshkosh area, to their kind of membership group. Amro has a business loan program. That one's fairly small. And then Neenah also has a small city business loan program. But again, it's very limited into just the city of Neenah and to a very small business sector. There's, so one of the things that I want to show with you, kind of showing these, is that we have a huge gap. If you are a business in Menasha that wants to do an expansion project, we don't have a loan fund like this. If you're a large business in a rural area, we don't have a loan program to support you.
Why can't you expand? Why can't you incorporate the entire county?
So why can't my programs do that? Because my money is City of Oshkosh money. So I am the money that we have in the 2 programs we have right now was funded by City of Oshkosh TIF. And the city of Oshkosh has set the limitations on where their funds would be utilized.
More,
So-
that's the discussion.
Mhm.
as to
Yeah.
What,
Yeah.
what major fund, similar to the other two we run, can address rural, because there's still a cap with USDA, not to exceed 40,000.
Oh, if somebody up in Fox Crossing.
Correct.
You can
Yeah.
Run something.
Yep.
pick any of the
Right.
townships, you
Right.
can grab
Bill-
anything from. Neenah
Clayton has a
to-
wonderful industrial
Clayton.
park that, you know, if somebody wanted to go there.
We saw
So,
that, I'm sorry.
so that's where I'm showing that there is a gap
That's the workshop today.
Yeah,
that we
there's
can,
definitely a need.
yep, there is a need that we can fill.
Can
utilizing
they do
this.
this and facilitate it countywide for our citizens that are, right, that's why this is.
Right.
happening.
Right.
That's what we're,
So
that's
that's
why we're
what
here.
we're talking about.
Yep. Yeah, where we're headed, hopefully.
Yep.
Right.
So, yeah, so just a few things about like, so how we currently operate these programs, right? The ones that we currently have in administration, we have bylaws. Every single one has a bylaw with the exception of our rapid recovery ones, because they were just operated within the bylaws that were existing. But we've got 20-page bylaws for every single program that we run that sets it out. Those are written by our staff, approved by our Rlf committee, and then would be approved by the funding entity. So like the city ones are approved by the long range finance committee for the city of Oshkosh, and then it actually goes up to the full council to approve those bylaws. We don't change them frequently, but we do look at them annually. My staff, Kathy, mainly is our, the main person who's managing our different programs. That includes marketing and promotion of those programs, the business consulting when we get the leads, the application assistance. We do underwriting in our own house, and then our accountant does all the accounting and payment tracking. That does roll up through our CLA, through our main, and then our board has oversight on those financials. So.
I'm from Oshkosh.
You're from Oshkosh.
My daughter works in Kakana.
Yeah, so we have a full structure to make sure that these funds are being, not only do you have oversight into what we're doing, but internally we have this oversight that's already set up. At every single board meeting, they see the account balances and and then we have an audit that we go through every year as well.
How are these funds marketed? How are the businesses getting?
That's a great
knowledge
question.
or-
I will get to that. So,
Certainly don't
because I have a great slide coming up that kind of explains the process. So the other part of our structure is that we do the Rlf committee. So it's 11 community members made up of commercial bankers. We try to represent a lot of the different entities that would be needed by a business. So we have an insurance agent, we have a lawyer, we have, what else am I missing? Accounting, yeah, we have an accounting person. We have, somebody who does more wealth management, those types of things. So people who have, even more information into these pieces that can help us evaluate more. So it really isn't just, it's not just giving some money to people. It's giving them this extra layer of assistance that they might need. And then we also have regular reporting. So we do quarterly written reports and annual presentations on our loan programs to keep the entities, the funding entities informed.
We also have a great relationship with SBDC.
Which is in my next slide.
There you go.
So you just asked about how do we get these leads, right? So we have a couple of different ways. Obviously, there's kind of this natural, place where we have, a lead might come from. So a big lead, we get leads from our commercial lenders. We have partnerships with a lot of the banks. Kathy spends time sitting down and explaining these programs to them. So when they have a project that maybe hits a speed bump, they can come to us to help get the rest of the way. Business meetings, as we go out and we do our BR&E and our reach out and we start talking about expansion programs, we can offer this up as a resource to them of how, that might bring them across the line. And then the referral piece is the other side where we're bringing in, sometimes SBDC refers them to us, sometimes accountant, city staff refers them to us, if they hear of a project that's coming up that might need some help. So we get referrals in from a lot of different entities. We have those relationships and we work those relationships to make sure that we have them educated on the programs as much as we're, so that way they can be a good referral source for us. We have it obviously on our website too. Sometimes we go to other presentations. We've done presentations with, like at the Venture Project or things like that, where we can work out and meet up with businesses that might be good applicants.
What about SBA? You work with them at all?
We do, yep. So the SBDC is actually a part of like SBA.
Oh, it is?
Yep, yep. So
Okay.
SBDC, well, it's located at UW Oshkosh, but it's actually an entity of SBA. So we have a very good relationship with
Oh, I didn't
SBA.
realize that.
Mhm, mhm.
What about other incubators like up in the Fox Valley, there's the tech with the Florida Union Center.
So at this point, we're not working with them because we don't have loan funds to reach them. So, but
True,
that
okay,
is something
yeah.
that we would add in is that
That's
relationship.
something that we might as a
Right.
county.
So if we were to have the county loan fund, those are relationships we would go and build.
Okay.
Yep.
What about SCORE?
Yep, we work with SCORE a lot. Yeah, and again, they're Fox Valley, so we have maybe one or two of our businesses have come through SCORE, but you know, I know that that's something that we'd have probably more of when we're hitting. I mean, they serve Oshkosh, but a lot more of their businesses are located Fox
Okay,
Valley, the
okay.
SCORE Fox Valley. Yep.
Got it.
Mhm.
And then the banks, I assume you hit the larger SBA banks, so like Associated, Nicolay, those kinds of.
Work with all of them,
Yeah.
all
Mhm.
of them, because the loans come separately. You've
Yeah.
got business partners that already have relationships with
Mhm.
the bank, so.
Right, the reason why I ask is I think Associated accounts for about 80% of all SBA loans.
Yep.
So it's,
Yep.
there's a significant amount that come through.
Right.
Them
Absolutely.
specifically.
And it's important because sometimes businesses don't come to us with a commercial lender. I can't tell you how many times we come through and we say, well, who's going to be your commercial banker? And they're like, well, I've banked here for years. I'm like, have you talked to their commercial person yet? Because a personal banking relationship is not the same as a personal business relationship. So sometimes, you know, it's the opposite direction where we're feeding people into the right bank who can offer, you know, who do specialize in SBA or even USDA backed loans. So we're kind of following that works both ways. So, yeah. So once that lead comes in, our staff does consultations. Like we mentioned, sometimes we bump them out to SBDC to help build if they're, you know, if they need a business plan, if they don't have cash flow, SBDC is a great resource. And then they'll come back in. We get to the application process. We make sure that they're all ready to go. They meet with our Rlf committee. So the Rlf committee has total oversight on the approval of the loans. They help approve the loans. They also set terms. So that's not something that the staff does. We might make a recommendation based on, oh, we think they need interest only for a period of time, or this is what works into their pro forma, but those decisions are made by the revolving loan fund committee. If they sometimes they ask us for more information and we have to go back and you know, get more details. Sometimes we do deny. We have definitely, I think that's one of the things that we not that we want to say we deny people, but we've turned down projects that either don't make sense for our economy or are not financially secure, because it is our purpose to make sure that these funds are coming back to the revolving loan fund so it can help more people. So if we get through the approval, then we go into the closing and the monitoring, which is, you know, that month we have the payment process set up. We do check in with the businesses regularly. We continue to coach them, especially if they're seeing rapid growth. If they're, I mean, you kind of get, you know, sometimes they're just right down the middle. You're like, that's great. But sometimes they have rapid growth. Well, how do you manage that rapid growth? Because that's another capital infusion that they might need. Or if they're not meeting their pro forma, how do we work with them to try to, you know, work back up to that.
When we do deny a business, do we refer them to other sources?
We do alternative funding sources.
So it's never just a straight no.
No,
Perfect
it's
question,
not.
right?
That's a great question. Yep, and that's why, yep. We don't say, sorry, we can't fund you, and we turn them away. We have one right now that doesn't quite fit into our program. We didn't even get to the application process. We said, you don't fit into what, you know, we can do. And so we're currently working on saying, where else can we connect them to? You know, like Avocap has a program, you know, WBD, you know, where else can we find some funds that will help match that might work better? Especially if it's something that we feel like is a good fit for ours, but maybe just too risky. So, yeah. So that's our process. Kind of give you an idea of how this works. A little bit on the results for the programs that we've managed. So we have dispersed over $2.4 million, $2.45 million through our program. It's over 81 different businesses assisted. Of course, a lot of those come through those COVID loans. And if you do go back and check my math, you'll notice it's not every, you know, we've had businesses that overlap in our programs. We've had people who started in the COVID loan program that then came back because, hey, now we got through the COVID challenge and now we have this expansion opportunity because of what happened in the economy following COVID. But this is equated to $9.7 million in total capital investment. So even though we have that one-to-one match, you can see that it's actually equating to a lot more than that. It's not just that 50%, it's a lot more than that that's come into our area that we serve. And we've calculated 191 jobs created. So that's the impact that the programs that we're currently running have had in the last 7 years.
And are these
And-
FTE jobs?
These are FTE. Yep. So, and that's 7 years, that's what we've done with our program in 7 years. So to think back of what this program could have done in the last 7 years. So,
I think that's the challenge we're facing right now, because the business community is like, hey, like, easy on creating more jobs. We have all these vacancies.
Mhm.
So,
Right.
But that's where we said, there's opportunities for us to focus on job retention.
right.
So does this allow a business to grow and retain the people that they have, or maybe even compensate them better because they're able to increase their production with better machinery, those kind of investments that can be made. Or they purchase their land, which means that they're not going anywhere because now they've bought the land, right? Where they were previously leasing, those kind of things that are important to consider. So I put out a couple opportunities that I see, and I didn't want to call them challenge. I want to call them opportunities, right? These are the things that this group has the opportunity to maybe address and overcome. Of course, we're going to find out what limitations we have from a state statute point of view too. But right now we are only funding small businesses in a rural area. So that's an opportunity. We're not funding, Menasha is not being funded. Those are the areas that we have somebody come to, and I have to say, I don't have anything for you. The access to capital is limited by the municipality guarantee. We have had people who we've had people who wanted to utilize this fund, and we went to the city of Oshkosh and they said, we don't, that's not something that we're interested in. We've gone to smaller municipalities, townships, and said, we can't handle that on our tax roll. So those we have tried to sell this program through our organization as it currently stands, and we have not been able to move forward.
That's
Go ahead.
a good point. That's another thing with the IDB currently, it goes against their bonding rating, correct?
Mhm.
Right,
Yeah.
on the bonding limits.
Mhm.
So any loan that we give to a municipality or business in a municipality, they have the 100% guarantee. It also counts against their debt levels,
Mhm.
correct?
Is that a requirement of us or of the state?
That's what
Yes.
that's Mary Ann's homework.
Yes,
what
that's a part of,
happened.
that's
No,
part of what
it-
that's part of an opportunity to overcome.
Right.
Okay.
But I will say, we had somebody, Town of Amro, it was a great business, startup business, and the Town of Amro there was no way they could help them with, using this current structure. Now we have the rural one, which that one could step in, but and I do want to jump back to that. Could we put more money into that rural revolving, the rural one that we have? Yes, but any more money we put into there it takes a federal identity because of the USDA grant that helped start it. So we want to be cautious with that. I would love to apply for another grant with that, but I'd only put more money into that if there's a matching money coming in from the federal level, because we're going to make it a federal identity. So yeah, competitive advantage, countywide funds. The fact that if somebody comes to me, like right now, if somebody comes to me and says, I want to find a site in Winnebago County, and I can put Greater Oshkosh Revolving Loan Fund on one, but not on not a NENA site, that detracts from some of these, even though that NENA site might be a better fit, it might detract. So those are the things we can be have a competitive advantage by saying this is available to the entire county.
But we are talking business and commercial, right? I mean, within this workshop, we're making
yep.
clear.
That's what we
don't
work
have an
with.
interest in doing loans for a municipality that needs a new sewer system or
Oh, no.
that is
Mhm.
managed through the
Private
IDB
sector.
and the county. We're
Yep,
talking private sector,
Yep.
business
Yep.
and commercial.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's an opportunity here where maybe if that is something that this wants to serve, that we, maybe it is dual, some of the money comes to the private sector and some of the money is left for the public sector. Those are things that you can decide on, but at the same time, I think that there's a lot more opportunity in the
I
public
like
sector,
private.
or the private
Yeah.
sector. Mhm.
We're sitting on nearly
Mhm.
33
Yep.
$1 million right now.
Yeah.
Correct.
I just wanted to make
So-
sure.
Yeah,
everybody
no,
knew we
it's-
didn't
yep.
have an
Good
interest
point.
in it.
Yeah,
Because
it's a
we
good
put
point.
somebody else in that.
That's not
just-
where we specialize. That's not where we give our,
On your opportunities, I just had, just for clarification, when you say small business, what do you mean? How do you define this?
small business in the USDA is less than $1 million in annual revenue and less than 50 full-time employees.
Right.
But the $1 million in annual revenue, that's a tough one. I mean, there's a lot of businesses who can do $1 million in revenue with 15 employees.
Mhm.
So we're excluding, even though you think, oh, how many 50 plus employees are in Winnebago or Amro? Not many, but we do exclude those people who are actually, bringing more than $1 million of revenue. So that's probably the tighter restriction on that loan fund.
And do we know of any programs, so you're saying competitive advantage with countywide funds, which I like, but so I'm gonna consider Outagamie, Fond du Lac. There's, what's it, what else?
Calumet,
Calumet,
yep.
yeah. Do those counties offer something similar currently?
They have some similar, yeah.
Yeah, there are some counties have complete economic development
Yeah.
course
Departments.
within themselves.
Right.
Yep. Winnebago's tough, you know, I think the challenge in Winnebago County that we have is that there are multiple. You know, there's the Oshkosh Chamber, then there's the Fox Valley Chamber, and then there's the fund in Amro, and then there's Go EDC. So we have all these different economic development corporations within one county. And this would be a way for Go EDC to help us to have some kind of umbrella thing to make sure we're covering everybody.
And it's
Go to my
not a
next slide.
criticism of the chamber.
Correct.
Yeah.
Chamber helps chamber members.
Yep.
They've got funds for their members. This, we go to the township meetings and this just opens it up to
Well, the
everybody.
Oshkosh.
Well,
yeah,
and-
Fox
and
Valley.
I would love for the chamber to have more in theirs too. I think I want all of these funds to operate side by side, because one of the things that Kathy gets to do when somebody comes to us is she gets to look at our arsenal and say, where do you fit the best, right? This business, which loan fund is best for you? And if they're better for the chamber, we send them that way. If they're better in the county, or, you know, that's kind of what we do to make sure that we're utilizing these funds for the benefit of everyone.
We've had over a period of time, maybe a larger direction on not just funds, but associated projects and whatever. Focus more in the Oshkosh area than into the hinterlands, such as Fox Crossing. And in many ways, many of the board members who are out to the outside feel that they're being, you know, left out, we'll say. And we do have needs out there, and we want to be able to be included in Winnebago County rather than to jump out of the county and look for help in, say, Outagamie County or you have areas in Menasha that are blighted and are overrun by people that have, you know, very needed, you know, help. They're really, we need to build and we need to construct buildings for rental or for ownership.
Right.
in
That's the
area.
hard part.
And we have to be able to get money to start at some point.
Yep.
In there, and if we can overlap Winnebago and Winnebago's connection with the Oshkosh or the EDC.
So that one of the things before I came here, before I said I was willing to sit in front of this board, that I did was I went and sat with Sam Schrader from City of Menasha and Chris Hayes from City of Neenah to talk to them a little bit of just, you know, what are you seeing from an economic standpoint? Do you see some, you know, how could this possibly work? And could you work with us as the representative for this loan program? Because it is important to me that this, I mean, I have assets in the City of Oshkosh. You know, if I don't need help in City of Oshkosh. We need help outside of the City of Oshkosh. So I think that's exactly what you're saying. Though, yes, there's some limitations on what we can do because of what the statutes say, you know, in terms of some of these developments or buildings, but there's definitely opportunities for, if we can help businesses, even if we help businesses in the way that we're talking about here, then maybe that allows them to help, you know, businesses in that regard, because we can kind of fill that gap, you know, with what we're doing, if that makes sense.
And were they willing to work with you? So you met with Chris Hayes as an example.
Yep.
What was his response?
Yeah, well, I said, I just said, I'm like, from a countywide perspective, is this something that you feel would be beneficial? You know, is this something that you have a need for? And he said, you know, well, any tool in a developer's, in a community person's pocket is a good tool, right? You want more tools. But yeah, they were absolutely positive about it and saying this is something that would be beneficial to, you know, I mean, they know it exists. And every single one, everyone's website, my website has this loan program on it, their websites had this loan program on it. But obviously, again, we haven't had these funds utilized to a way that actually helps their community. So they were very positive about it.
Mary, you have
We talked a
something?
lot of topics, but yeah.
I think one thing we need to look at is you guys know what you're doing. You have full-time staff, like you review them to see where they fit. We're a committee of, or a board of
No.
not
Non-
professionals in this field.
Exactly. Mhm.
In my opinion, this is a smart move. We haven't had any movement on these loans for years. So we're sitting with 2.7 million that absolutely there's businesses out there that could use, but the municipality can't take that risk.
Yeah.
I don't think they knew about it though. To Murray's point, the truth is, out of our COVID loan, just on the county program, 37 of those loans, 15 were in Oshkosh. The others were everywhere else because they don't exist. I don't think there is a program out there for them. And Trish was being bashful. She wrote the USDA grant and it's a huge benefit, but it's still capped. Does anybody know if you could really build something for $40,000?
Yeah, financing.
It's capped
Mhm.
financing. So
Yeah.
I think people need to understand the rule of threes too.
Mhm.
Can't reconnect utilities for $40,000.
Correct. So
Yeah.
when you say you have an excess of 2.7 or something, I promise you, people will start taking heed of opportunities at 100,000. We also explain the rule of threes of how most of our loans go, a third, where all the money comes from.
John?
Just a couple of things I want to point out, and I really appreciated the discussion. I think we've had a lot of good thought here. I love the idea of the Go EBC really helping us to facilitate this fund. One thing, when we talk about all these other economic development entities in Winnebago County, some of the things with chambers is chambers tend to get into policy and political. Go EBC does not, and it's a public-private, and it's very much independent, and I really like that force behind it. The thing that I'd like to see out of this workshop is make sure that when we're looking at these communities that do have these funds, how do we partner with that? Like if it's the 1-to-1, or maybe we're 60% and they're 40%, so it's not like we're cutting them out.
Right.
That's not the point, but we're still getting to Fox crossing as well. Want to make sure I threw that in there. But also to make sure that
I
we're.
didn't mean that George, but I also know that George is here on this committee. Too,
Right.
so
But
I figured he could get his buy-in.
Right, we're also looking at the other entities that are out there. I know I'm on the PACE Commission, and it seems like every month we're giving away $1 million loans at low interest rates for things that improve the environmental impact or the sustainability of a business. Now, a lot of that is residential and in industry, but to make sure that their staff will be able to make sure all these things coming together to really help the business.
Yeah. You can see that's my last point on there, work
Yep.
to access grants and funds.
Yep.
It's grants and funds, like, so obviously we did the USDA one, the WEDC, those are grants that we wrote. So those are things that we bring to the table, but it's also, like you said, every business that we evaluate right now, can you get a Main Street bounce back grant? Do you qualify for this? Do you qualify? We're making sure that they get, we want our money to go as far as it can go. So whatever else we can put alongside it to make them as successful as possible.
And right now, Menasha doesn't have somebody who can answer that question. Fox Crossing doesn't have somebody that understands it right now. Nepiaskin, Nakaima, all these other places, they don't. So this would grant that ability to have that champion.
But as you know, we go to all those meetings.
Yep.
I mean, we are at those monthly, and some people kind of think we're county staff and we've got to come.
Yep.
Well, I think part of the other issue is that I would probably argue that Oshkosh has probably one of the best chambers in the state. I mean, really. And so that's the other thing, is that they're all, you get out to other cities within Winnebago County, and they don't necessarily even have that support that Oshkosh does. So I think anything that we can do to help would be great. And I don't want to.
You can
cart
get
before the
out.
horse, but I assume, I'm not asking the amount, but I assume that there'd be a cost to administer all of this as well, right? So we would have to also consider that as we go down, right?
Yeah.
Maureen?
To you and to and Jerry, what did we use last year for that small batch of loans that we passed through the various
Yeah.
towns.
Yeah, we used our revolving loan fund dollars to reallocate for the purpose of this, that
And who
COVID,
was managing that? I mean, as far.
that was Go
that
EDC
Go
was
EDC.
managing that,
So
yes.
we do have
Mhm.
a connection right
Yes.
now with you in that.
Yes,
It's just a matter of different dollars
Mhm.
going into it.
yes.
Yeah.
We have a question from Elizabeth.
Elizabeth,
Hi, everyone. Actually, it's more of a comment. I just wanted to weigh in as someone who's worked in economic development for a long time. This program worked great for the first 30 years, right? But times have really changed. And we've been talking for years about how this money is sitting there and not being utilized. And Go EDC knows how impactful this money could be if it was out there and being deployed. And, you know, the guarantee is really tough for many municipalities, and this has been an issue for a long time. So I'm completely in favor of us looking at this and trying to figure out a way to make it work better. And I totally agree, John, with your comments about how Go EDC is really well positioned. Not only do they have expertise, but the chamber is focused on Oshkosh. It does have political tones to it, and it frankly caters more to its members, and it should as a membership organization. One of the reasons why Go EDC was, created was to have that apolitical public-private partnership that could really just be focused on the economic development pieces. So I just wanted to weigh in as someone who has some historical context on this, that this is well overdue and needed.
thank you.
If I may, that is an endorsement coming from past chairman of the Oshkosh Chamber. One other thing that I want to encourage this board that after this workshop, any discussion item that does come up with this, I want to make sure that we're really supporting the chairman and that you're showing up. For the record, both Chairman Keller and myself serve on the Go EDC board, so we will have to abstain from any vote that has to do with this. So just to make sure, if you see that action item coming up, I would encourage everybody to make sure that we're here so that we can have a quorum.
Thanks, thanks, John.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Tricia, back to you.
I just want to say, just thank, like I said, Kathy is amazing in my team for the work she's been doing on this. Art has been working really hard with Jerry and kind of trying to, see how we can go forward. So, I mean, I just appreciate my team for being here today. And thank you guys too, for just listening to kind of what we have to say and considering this and, wanting to work together to do good things for Winnebago County.
So,
One clarification, how
Yeah.
big is the chamber loan? When you said they also have access to, how big is that loan?
They do up to like $50,000, I think.
It
So,
was 25 and I
Yeah.
think it's up to 50.
Mhm.
Yeah.
but I also
Is there
know
a
that
fund
they,
amount or a total, or do they borrow that?
No, I think there's a fund amount and
Yeah.
don't hold me to it. I seem to recollect right around 100 or 1.5 million.
Okay.
but I also know that they've dispersed most of their funds right now. I mean, access capital, especially with what we're seeing in interest rates, it's very popular right now. Well, it's not just interest rates. SBA loans, just so you know, sorry, this is something I should have put in my presentation. If you're doing an SBA loan, it's usually, and you're doing a real estate, it's based on the assessment, the assessed value of your project. Well, that's based on like state of Wisconsin, there's not a lot, and so often right now, construction costs are exceeding that value. So a lot of the projects we've done in the last year have filled that gap of the SBA loan will only get you to 500,000, but your construction costs bring you to 600,000. So now that's that gap. And what else are you going to do, right? The SBA will only do the assessed value.
As interest rates climb, these programs are going to be more and more
Mhm.
critical
And
for.
they can do restaurants, right, and retail.
They can,
Chamber.
yeah.
The chamber can,
The
yep.
chamber can, yep.
Predominantly for their members. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean they wouldn't. but
Right.
Right.
They really are Oshkosh
Yep.
focused.
You are currently looking to expand into the other areas of the Fox Valley rather than staying to the south. And
Well, if you look at what we're currently serving right now, when we say Greater Oshkosh, we mean Greater Oshkosh. So we currently serve basically the only municipalities we don't directly serve right now are Needham and Asha Fox Crossings. The town of Clayton also, but I mean, so a lot of you
used
look
to
at
go,
the-
and then they hired their own
Mhm.
BDO, and so, I mean, it was kind of,
Right.
you don't need to come, we've got our own program.
But so in those communities, we'd be partnering with, but if you look at your IDB per capita, a lot of our rural townships have selected us as their economic development representation. So we really are serving that, and that's where my rural fund, we try to reach those people with that fund. That's what our goal was.
Yeah.
So,
14 of the 18, Murray, 14 of the 18 municipalities we actually go to. The northeast corner, they got
And-
their own form of government, and the city of Amos. I
And-
believe is the other one that we don't.
And this loan fund that we're proposing is intended to be countywide. So
Yep.
it's not intended to leave anybody out. It's intended to be a true countywide, rural, urban,
the
entire-
only
Yeah.
reason the rural fund excludes those cities is because they are not defined as rural by the USDA. Neenah, Menasha, Oshkosh are not defined as rural by the
Yeah.
USDA. So that's why the rural fund currently excludes them. But that's the only reason why, because it's specifically a rural designation by the
Yeah.
USDA.
That is-
Otherwise, we would serve them if we could.
That is an important distinction when we started talking a long time. Do you really want to include still the city, but taking the high road? As Jerry's made clear, the county is the county. And so whether or not they're in Oshkosh and they still have access to both funds, we're gonna push it out to as many rural, and that would be our opportunity to have something to share. When you have a new program, clerks share it, business people share it, but it would still be open to Oshkosh businesses.
yeah, and and as they Tricia's described, the city of Oshkosh itself and with their loan and Go EDC's loan program that they currently have for the city. There may not be a lot of inquiries from the city of Oshkosh itself, because it's essentially in a way they're already taken care of. I don't think it would mean that it would completely exclude Oshkosh, but I don't think there would be a lot of inquiries from Oshkosh, but there might be, you never know. But it's,
But it'd be new for Menasha and.
yeah, it would exactly be opening this really up for everyone else in the county.
Mary, did you want to give us some thoughts on what you found so far?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not prepared to give you any thoughts at this point in time, especially I have not spoken with Andy
Mhm.
regarding any of this, so
Okay,
if we could refer to the next meeting. that would be
Yeah, Mary Ann's
Yeah.
currently down an attorney and,
oh,
she's.
And a paralegal.
And a paralegal, and has been doing a good job. And I did reach out to Andy Phillips only to figure out if there's a way that we can connect this to some kind of housing aspect.
Mhm.
Whether it be through the industry side of that, if there's a way for us to really bring down some of the costs of this housing and start attracting people from Milwaukee and Chicago. It'd be a workhorse.
so improving the housing situation, so people can attract people, so employers got people to employ.
Yeah, but we don't get more people here. It's gonna be really hard to create more jobs, and the more jobs are created is a more competitive labor market. And at that point, we're hurting our businesses rather than helping them. And I think we're all very cognizant of that.
And,
yeah,
and,
absolutely.
and part of that effort too, just go along with what you're saying, John, is, there's, part of the effort should be also that, hey, we've got kids graduating from high school around here that end up just, they leave, they leave the area. Part of the effort's got to be also just retaining those sources of employment, just to retain those people, to have them stay here, stay in the Fox Valley, stay in the Oshkosh Fox Valley area instead of moving away. That's part of the challenge too, is
That's why the homework between Mary Ann and Andy is going to be very crucial.
Yep.
Yeah, anything else?
I think we talked plenty today, so.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, then I guess we need to, think about it, wait for Mary to do some research.
Mhm.
Yep, and
Um,
Yeah, we'll probably just schedule another meeting
Schedule another meeting?
at some point, coming up here. We'll let you know, we'll inventory the board again as far as your availability. And, but, we wanted to just introduce this today. Kind of get the discussion going. You know, we'd like to hopefully get something going and starting in 2023 at some point. So, you know,
Are we thinking we're gonna meet this year then?
potentially that could happen, Brian, yes. Not a given, but yes, I do foresee potentially that we would meet once more this year on this. Whether that's to actually take action on this or more information. We're still kind of working through this yet.
We don't, initially, we talked about maybe first quarter of 2023 would be.
Yeah.
That's the date. We're not hooking it to a date saying this thing has to be up and running by 1/1/23. Just maybe if it happened the first part of the year, and that way we have something to go with.
Counting only 3 pages and we're out of the year.
Yeah, we're in fourth quarter, so I would just recommend, if you're gonna try to do that, we would try to get a date sooner rather than later, because I know that
Yeah,
as we get closer to the end of the quarter, it becomes
Mhm.
much more difficult. for me.
Yeah. Understood. Yeah.
Okay, then.
I'm wide open. I don't know what's.
Yeah. You work for county government, of course.
Yeah. So are you guessing,
Let's
are you
go.
guessing on a next meeting date? You're coming up
and-
with?
At this point, I don't have anything in mind, but we're probably looking at sometime in that area between when, you know, after budget time with the county board and Thanksgiving. So we're talking maybe mid-November-ish.
Chairman, if I may, I think the decision point will be when Mary Ann and
That's the
Andy come to some agreement. The next step will be Mary Ann and Andy contacting going to see to make sure the staff is ready. And then when they decide that things are ready to go, they'll probably reach out to Jerry and the chairman. And then
Yeah,
we'll
there you
probably
go.
figure out when
Mhm.
we're ready. There is a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
So is this board considered a board of the county board? Do we have
A
to be
committee?
concerned? Yeah, I'm sorry,
No.
committee of the county board.
No, it is,
No.
it
Do we
is
have to be
a,
cons-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Let me just ask.
Sure,
I'm sorry,
sorry.
I should have asked the whole thing. There are a few rules, right, that we have to
Mm-hmm.
abide by. If it is, that's why I'm asking. So there's
So-
one where we can't meet prior to 3 o'clock and then we can vote remotely
yeah,
currently.
yeah, this board lies out. This board is,
Unless we.
I think
vote.
he's right. I think we have to, but we don't have an action item to vote to set times, do we unanimously?
No,
Mhm.
So we'll have to
you're gonna
make
have
sure that,
another meeting
correct.
and raise it at that point in
Yep.
time, because there was a resolution that was brought
Thank you.
before the county board. It was approved.
Yep.
It said all committee meetings should start at 3 or after unless unanimously agreed by the committee to vote at another time or to go forward at another time. And there are a number of committees that are going forward before 3 o'clock.
And this would have, this IDB board.
Yep.
Is ruled by that resolution.
Yes,
I
but well,
I question.
So is the health
I
board,
question.
so is human services,
Okay.
so is veteran services. So there are a whole lot of other boards that are just like that are doing
You
this.
can get around, you can get around the rule by unanimously
Right.
saying you want at a meeting date certain,
Mhm.
okay? And then put the time and date certain so that we can go back to the next date and that,
but the question,
based on your priority list. Okay, you're not gonna get to Andy until after the end of November. So tell us, tell us at least a span of time that his secretary can go out and put the doodle out and we can.
Well, typically this board, when we meet, we don't set the next meeting date and time.
No,
It's an as needed
Mhm.
meeting. And when it comes up and Jerry has an agenda item that has to be addressed, he calls the meeting. I don't see why we should change that now.
Yeah, you know, this board generally meets, on average, 3 to maybe as much as 5 times a year. And really no more than that, you know. It's not a monthly set. You know, we have things we need to address from time to time. Obviously, we have something now, but. And this board is incorporated under state statute. And it distinctly lies outside of normal county, the normal county organization, and that's done by state statute. It's intentional. It's so this board is set up so it can address issues of, you know, unemployment, economic development, and we can do it outside of normal county business operations. So we're not restricted by those
I think
requirements.
the biggest distinction that I see between this board and like committees is if we vote to approve spending some money on something, it does not go to the county board.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's a big distinction.
I think the statutes were set up that way
Yes,
across the state to allow the flexibility for.
I don't think it hurts to, next time we do meet, put the action item on.
I don't think it hurts either.
Yep.
Because you can make the argument that the health board would fit into that category
Yep.
and they abide by those rules. There's a
Solid
lot of
waste.
solid waste also abide. So I think we want to be consistent.
Yep.
So I think it doesn't hurt.
but this is under a different set of statutes than even those boards. It just is. I mean, you
Yeah,
know.
it comes down to Mary Ann.
And I
Yeah,
will
so,
look at the
so
statute.
I've
I will look
been
at the
talking to Mary Ann about it, you know, to
Right.
just to
But I'm just
verify.
posing the question. I'm not.
Yeah,
you know,
Yeah,
proposing anything, but.
Yep.
yeah. No, I appreciate that, Brian. Thank you.
So next meeting will be as determined
Mhm.
when Jerry, Mary Ann, anybody else is ready. I'm assuming anybody has any questions, they can email
I
GoEBC.
have my business cards, if anyone wants to reach out and ask questions, or
Yeah,
you want to sit over coffee and talk about this for 2 more hours, I can do that.
yeah, okay.
Thank you.
So I need a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion.
Second.
Motion made and second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Great discussion, everybody.